Hello, this is Richard Peers from Finextra TV, and I'm delighted to be doing a multi-party interview today with a number of exciting folk from across the sustainable finance industry. We've got with us today, we've got Kristian Ronn, who's co-founder of Normative. We've got Matt Smith, Dr. Matt Smith, who's Chief Product Officer at Agrimetrics, and Mark Line, who is a Director and Non-Executive Director at Challenge Sustainability. Hello, guys.
Hi. How are you doing?
Hello.
Well, we better say who's who. So, Kristian, put your hand up. Matt.
Hello.
And of course, Mark. Very good. So, listen, guys, we had a conversation pre-lockdown, and we all enjoyed it. We thought we'd share it with the folks who listen to and watch Finextra. And we'd like to first of all start with Normative and with you, Kristian, to tell us a little bit about your organization, but in the context of some of the principles we want to talk to you today, and maybe an example of where you guys work. So perhaps over to you to start with, if that's okay.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot. So when we started this organization, it was from the realization that we live in an exponential world. And so far, that means that we have had an exponential growth, but also an exponential growth of carbon into the atmosphere and use of resources. But in order to avoid a catastrophic climate change scenario, we need to have exponential climate action. And to do that, we need to be able to account and measure sustainability as precisely as we measure the balance sheet in our financial bookkeeping. So to give you an example of how Normative works, and to give you a little bit of a case. So for instance, we work with a great private equity firm called Summa Equity. And in order to produce their sustainability report, which is a part of their annual report, our approach, which is very unique, is to apply the same principles for financial accounting. So they upload their data from their ERP system, all of the portfolio companies, into our platform. And then we have a mathematical specification of all sustainability disclosures. So based on the underlying data, we can calculate carbon emissions, we can calculate gender diversity issues and so on in a very precise and comparable way across the entire portfolio. And this is just the case, and that's what we do with all of our companies. And we think that it's important for all stakeholders to have comparability when it comes to sustainability disclosures, the same way we have it with financial disclosures.
Cool. That's a great setup. Thanks, Mark. I mean, you've been in this business for 20 odd years, and you've seen this whole journey. I know when we spoke before, you had various thoughts around this. One positive, in that this may be a way of bringing in a lot of people who don't report at all. But what was your reaction to Normative and the sort of things there that Kristian's just outlined?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's potentially very interesting. We're in a place now where a lot of the kind of big players are reporting, but that's only a small proportion of the total number of companies, organizations in the world. To give you some context, there's maybe 5,000 companies reporting each year using the Global Reporting Initiative framework, some good, some bad. The biggest sustainability initiative is the Global Compact, the UN Global Compact, 12,000 members. In theory, 12,000 signatories writing reports each year, but the devil's in the detail. And I think what Kristian's team, Normative, are offering is potentially a vehicle which will enable a much greater volume of reporters producing information in a comparable way. Which more reporting has to be a good thing in terms of achieving sustainable finance. Of course, the devil's in the detail, and let's talk about that as we move forwards.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks for that. We'll certainly come back to that. I mean, Matt, just to bring you in, you're in the world of real hands in the ground material data, so to speak. At Agrimetrics. What's your view, just to sort of give us your context on data reporting, and all of these different things, EU taxonomy that we hear about from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, what we've heard from Normative is just this sort of organization that we're seeing being requested and seeing being created. And we're seeing this demand for reliable sustainability accounting. But a challenge is that evaluating a sustainability footprint is so much more multidimensional than a financial footprint. And moreover, we're only just starting to work out how we account for that. And so there's a lot of development that's needed in relation to it. So in order to meet the demand for that sustainability footprint information, we're having to work out how do we work with what we already have, and how do we improve the collection going forward of yet more better sustainability information. And we see that then as an opportunity for industries in terms of being able to provide that sustainability data. But the challenge is, how do we cost effectively surface what that sustainability information is about and how it relates to other sustainability information? So for example, adding up the carbon footprint along a supply chain from primary production through processing to end consumer. It's recorded in different ways, using different units at different times. It's a solvable problem, and it's a solvable problem helped by technology. And so we see a key need is building capabilities that do allow for us to understand what the different data sets are talking about, how we compare like with like, add up appropriately, and service that in a way that in itself is sustainable, because doing sustainability accounting right now has a lot of room for improvement because there's a lot of manual steps and even just going through the data.
Yeah. And so in a way, I was quite excited by the idea of ingesting that data from many different existing systems and processes, normalizing that, and then creating the reports that obviously different actors are going to require. Kristian, from your point of view, how do you go about this, and how do you contextualize that against what Mark and Matt have just focused on?
So I think, what we have talked about a bit, touched upon, is the fact that there's multiple frameworks out there for how to report on sustainability. And you have, for instance, the GRI, the CDP, you now have the Action Plan of Sustainable Finance in the European Union, and the taxonomy. And I think it's important to decouple the reporting framework from the actual accounting in the conversation. And I think the place where we are right now when it comes to sustainability reporting is kind of, back in the 15th century when double entry bookkeeping was just invented. Right now we have, things, we know what we need to report on in GRI. It's, carbon and diversity and supply chain and so on. But the devil is in the details here. How exactly do we calculate those metrics in the first place? And that is an important discussion that we need to have, and we need to agree upon and standardize. So when I, as a stakeholder or potential investor at a pension fund, compare company A to company B, I will get exactly the same results. And in the end, what gets measured gets managed, is my philosophy.
Yeah, Mark, I know you've been in this world a long time. What are your thoughts? You've got your hand up.
No, I really like Kristian's answer, and I think what's potentially, if I understand it correctly, what's exciting about Normative is the way in which you're able to put an accurate, I'll backpedal. You're able to estimate impacts in a consistent way in the supply chain of organisations.
Yeah.
And the reason that I think that's really helpful is that, for companies which are struggling, you're able to say to them, well, it looks like the majority of the impact in your supply chain perhaps rests with these 10 suppliers, and this is what we think that their impact looks like. And they can then go away and actually apply some, pressure on those suppliers, or support them in providing even more accurate data, and then it becomes a kind of, a virtuous circle. So that's what I think is exciting, because it kind of opens the door to more reporting, which is what we need. And I absolutely agree with what you said about, if you like, the accounting being separate from the standards and framework behind them.
Yeah, and I think, if you look at sort of in the consumer, I'm talking to a lot of startups who are saying, look, we can give you, the consumer, a view of your shopping basket, and you can see, who's actually contributing what to your sustainability goals. That allows the consumer then to change their shopping habits. In a way, what you're saying, Mark, is that this tool is allowing the corporate to understand and change their supplier habits, almost, if you will. So that's interesting, be it estimated or accurate. And then on the accurate side, Matt, when you're working here with bringing your data in, literally in the agricultural industry by using sensors and satellites and so forth, and creating these data markets, do you see that this quality of data, which is really material, is that going to be accessible for a corporate and its suppliers that are saying, look, I do want to get a grip on this?
Yeah, we're trying to make it so. I mean, that's why it really is so exciting right now. We talk about sustainability being the new productivity, because it's impacting every industry, including agriculture. And it's so urgent that we don't have time to work out the best way to collect the data. We've got to work out how we get the best with what we've got and continually improve. And as a result of continual improvement, then there's new opportunities for market differentiation, product differentiation as we go on. And so it's very exciting in the agricultural sector right now, within the primary production sector, then increasing pressure on them to be showing that they're producing right. And then they're opening up in relation to that new opportunities to sell what they produce to different markets and in different ways. And what the portfolio of what they produce itself being broadened. So not just the carrots or the things that are being dug out of the ground, but also the way in which that is produced in terms of organic carrots, or it's regenerating the soil or whatever, but also environmental stewardship and in recovering biodiversity and improving the wider environment. All these are financial generation mechanisms, new economic mechanisms for supporting the primary production sector. And so it's all about streamlining the process for those primary producers in surfacing ultimately that evidence about how what they're doing is achieving the goals, both in terms of feeding people and sustaining and healing the planet.
Yeah. Yes, please go.
Yeah, I think that is an excellent point. And I think that goes into a mindset of like a realization, rather, that sustainable finance in the end is just finance. Like, the climate impact has a real cost, and the benefits of doing things sustainably with regenerative agriculture, that is a real benefit that you in the end can quantify, at least in theory, in financial metrics. So my dream scenario is really a scenario when you do not just talk about sustainable finance as an add-on, but the realization that this is actually part of real finance. And in order to do so, you need standardized accounting procedures.
So listen, Mark, please go ahead.
Yeah, no, just to build on that, I mean, trying to kind of join the dots. I mean, I did a lot of work with Unilever in the 90s on their environmental accounting, and they're well known for some excellent work. And if you look at them and the other big food brand owners, many of whom have done excellent work on enumerating their own direct impact from their operations, that they say very clearly that 80 or 90% of their impacts on water impact, biodiversity impacts, in some ways climate impact, lies right at the other end of the supply chain amongst the agricultural producers. So it just occurred to me, as listening to the guy speaking then, that this is a brilliant way of, if you like, joining the dots.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's the idea of this sort of planetary computer, as our previous employer would have mentioned it, and then bringing that sensor of data all the way through supply chains, putting it into an accounting framework, which means that you can then measure it and then report on it, and obviously give it its financial weight, so that the reward and the risk can be properly assessed for the capital to flow and generate more of those. It's interesting, I noticed in the BBC today, they've done a whole piece on climate change. So they're really talking about the sort of build back better. What are we going to look like post-COVID? What should we be doing with the funds that are going to corporates? Should they be actually using it for projects that are going to contribute positively to climate change, etc.? Kristian, from your point of view, how do you see the world, post-COVID in this context?
So I think what we have seen because of COVID-19 is that there is a silver lining to the whole thing. I mean, lots of people have lost their jobs and lost their lives. So the human cost is huge. But it has also shown us cities in India and China where you can see the sky for the first time. We have seen a reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. So I think the positive thing is that we're having the conversation now. What are we going to do post-COVID? And hopefully the fact that we talk about it might lead to some tangible action down the line, where pension funds perhaps will de-invest in everything related to coal. And also, I mean, talking supply chain, for instance, supply chain risk of carbon. But so that is my take on the issue.
Okay, Matt.
Yeah, I want to pick up where with the theme that Kristian used there in terms of focusing on the silver lining. And we are seeing some benefits right now because of the disruption in forcing people to try capabilities that they hadn't really tried before, that enables automated monitoring of sustainability information. Just like we're experiencing, a lot of people are experiencing the benefits of video conferencing for the first time and learning how to use it. So the same in terms of satellite observations of production and impact on habitats and things like that. So that will better enable us down the line for more cost effectively doing sustainability accounting. But the second element is bringing the importance of the resistance and the resilience of the supply chain and supply chains, agri-food system and more widely, to shocks and progressive change. What we are seeing is that the big disruption in certain areas with overproduction and undersupply, because of a lack of ability to anticipate the effects of these shocks. And where we have that ability to anticipate, it's because we have the data about what's going on and we understand what's controlling the flows through the system. And it's the same thing if we're to do effective sustainability accounting, then we need to be able to monitor the right things as we go and learn how to turn that into understanding how we provide, sustainable supply chains and sustainable businesses going forward. It's all interwoven together. And I think that, yeah, the disruption has emphasized the importance of appropriate monitoring in having robust and resilient systems to disruption, whether it's short-term shocks or long-term effects of climate change.
Interesting. Mark, I'll leave the last word with you.
Oh dear. Well, I'd like to be positive. And, I do see the potential of this moment of pause for us all to think about how we live and what we want from the future. And, I'm sure there's lots of potential for a kind of greener trajectory moving forwards. However, the backdrop is a world in which there's been continuing political fragmentation, increasing protectionism, nationalism, etc. And, the only way in which we'll achieve a kind of a greener future is with more collaboration. So that's a big ask of our political masters and the big corporates, but maybe it could happen.
Well, I think it's interesting that, just picking up on Matt's point, I'm giving myself the last thought here now, just spontaneously. But, for years, we've been sitting working at home and doing video and telephone conferencing if you work for a Microsoft. And so to have everybody now going, wow, it's amazing that you can do this thing. It's kind of amazing. And we think the amount of money and time we spent on trying to convince you of this, it took a compelling event for you to realize. So, Mark, I'm hoping that your many years of trying to convince people about climate change, we've now got the compelling event and we are actually going to do something about it.
Well, maybe, but I mean, just my challenge is that recently the carbon impact of the global ICT industry, information and communication technology industry, exceeded that of air transport. So a couple of years ago, it was 3.6% of the global inventory was ICT and only 2% air travel. And it will be very interesting to see how that looks in 2020, because there's been this explosion of reliance on the internet.
Yeah, no, it's a good point, Matt.
So
you make a great point, Mark. I mean, that's where a real key area for innovation as well is sustainable technologies for enabling a sustainable future. And we have to the technologies we use themselves need to be sustainable. And there's a lot of improvements that can be made, which is a great opportunity for organizations too.
And I think they are happening, but yeah, good point.
Very good. Guys, I really feel as though we should come back to a sort of maybe an episode 2, 3, and 4 of this. I love this conversation. But for the sake of our poor listeners who've got to get back to sort of homeschooling and goodness knows what else, we'll leave it there for now. Thanks very much for your time and really enjoyed it. Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much, Richard. Thanks, everyone.